you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big show. I think we just got the batter at half, the Iron Lady there. So she did her part, and here, we'll see if we can reintroduce her again. She's just being really short with us. What's going on with that? Anyway, guys, welcome to the big show. As always, for 16 years, we've been bringing the Chris Voss Show. The smartest people, the most brilliant minds. And, of course, that's why we have guests on the show, because I'm just some idiot with a mic. That rounded out really nicely. It sounded as good in my head as it came out. So we have all the smartest people. And if you don't believe me, we'll go listen to all the 2,200 episodes or whatever it is nowadays that they're up and growing. 2 to 3 to sometimes 4 shows a weekday. That's 15, 20 shows a week, people. What more do you want from me already? Refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss, one on the TikTokity, all those crazy places on the internet. We have an amazing young man on the show with us today. We're going to be talking about his newest book. Gregory J. Leeson joins us. His book is entitled Ordinary People, Extraordinary Lives, A Path to Reconciliation in Our Own Divided Times. Boy, do we sure need some help. It came out September 30th, 2024, and we'll be getting his insights as well. He hails from the picturesque shores of Halifax, Nova Scotia. He has a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Western Ontario. And after a brief yet intense foray in investment banking in Toronto, he made a bold leap to the United States, coming to the big city there, as it were, trading bond futures at the Chicago Board of Trade, or otherwise known as the CBOT. The CBOT. Yep. Is that what it's known as? I don't know.
That's it.
Yeah, I remember my day training stuff. Years later, following a life setback, he became a self-taught expert in various software engineer language and co-founded Chinova Software, crafting innovative systems for renowned companies such as Sears Roebuck, Quaker Oats, and Abbott Laboratories. His eclectic career accumulated with retirement in 2022 as a senior R&D manager at Pfizer. And now we have him here with his new book. Welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Chris. Good to be with you today.
Good to have you as well. This is exciting. New books are always wonderful. They bring forth all sorts of smartness. Give us any .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
So it's GregoryLeesonBooks.com, and Leeson is L2ESON.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside this new book?
So the new book, people ask me, where did this come from? And I thought it started in 2015. But actually, it probably started as far back as grade 4, when an interesting year of my life. I grew up in a normal family, very stable, but very, very stereotypically British. And there was tremendous support or tremendous stability, but not a lot of support and so forth. And grade 4 things started happening, and I started having some seizures, and my teacher told my parents that I was living in my own world, and I stopped reading fiction. And that was the big thing, Chris. And I started reading biographies. And probably between grade 4 and grade 10 or grade 11 or so, I read probably more biographies than most people might read in a lifetime. That's when it kind of started, in a way, the biography part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember falling in love with biographies of war heroes. Like I was reading a lot of Eisenhower, MacArthur, and different things. I was just enthralled with those when I was in 4th grade. I don't know why.
Yeah, 4th grade. For me, it was all sports. I read all athletes and coaches, and they were the best teachers I could ever have. And then, so that's when the idea of being interested in other people's lives started. Mm-hmm. And then in 2015, on the master ceremony at my 40th high school reunion back in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and since I was kind of running the show, I tried to make sure I talked to as many people as I could. And I heard some great, great stories. Some of them I knew, like one of my friends who was my roommate in college, he went on to become head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL. I was a guy there who's Deputy Commissioner number 2 in command of the RCMP. So there's some great stories. I thought, wow, I wonder if anybody's ever written a book about people, just ordinary people, and so forth. And I thought, yeah, but that's not for you, Greg. You're a math guy. You don't know anything about letters. So I kind of dismissed the whole idea, right? Mm-hmm. Then in 2019, I'm divorced and I'm on a date with this woman. She's a bit of a bibliophile and we're talking and she's into motivational books and philosophy and that. As I'm talking, she stops me mid-sentence and she says, Greg, have you ever thought of writing a book? I said, no one's ever asked me that one before. I said, but I have one book in me, but it's not about me. It's about everyone else. And she said, go for it. I never saw her again, but I talked to a friend of mine the next week and I said, listen, I got this idea. And my friend just happened to be from India. I had an incredible story of how he made his way from India to the University of Buffalo to get his PhD and was working at Pfizer as a chemist. And he said, Greg, go for it. And then, of course, COVID set in and that kind of put everything on hold until a retirement in October of 21. And that's when it all started for real.
Oh, wow. And so what was the proponent that led you to the book finally, where you're like, I'm doing a book on this? What was the proponent for that?
Yeah. So it was the idea of ordinary people in their lives. And over COVID, of course, I was working at home for 19 months for Pfizer, unable to go in the office. It was difficult. And so I did some reading, and 2 of the books I read, one was by a guy by the name of Bruce Feiler, Life is in the Transitions. And Bruce spent 2 years going to all 50 states, interviewing people about how they get through difficult times in their life, right? Mm-hmm. And in his book, he introduced me to a guy by the name of Dan McAdams, Harvard PhD, Northwestern University professor, works only about 25 miles away from where I live. And McAdams had this great book called The Stories We Live By. He is one of the world's pioneers in narrative psychology. And his whole thing is about storytelling and so forth. And he wrote this book, and in this book, he lives a protocol, about 22 questions that he and his graduate students have been using for decades to get people's stories. Mm-hmm. And he said, here it is, use it. So I contacted him and got his permission to use his protocol. And from Bruce, I took the idea of travel. So after I retired in October of 21, and May 1st, 2022, the day I turned 65, I rented my home, hit the road, and I was on the road for exactly 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day, 26,403 miles, 53 cities, 39 states, 8 provinces in Canada,
wow,
finding people to interview them about their life.
Where do you get the energy for this? Is there a coffee you're drinking or something I need to know about?
Actually, I don't drink coffee. No, I've always been a high... Yeah, maybe it. I've always been a high energy guy. It's just, and this is something I wanted to do in my life, you know?
I'll have what he's having, waiter.
Yeah, I remember that scene.
I mean, that's a lot of work. And so when you set out with this vision to accomplish this, did you know that it was going to end up the way you wanted, or were you taking a bit of a risk?
I was taking a bit of a risk. Some people thought I was kind of nuts, you know, but here's the thing, Chris, and this is the way I am. I rented my home for 13 months, so I had absolutely no backdrop. I had to do it.
Burn the ships behind you.
Yep. That's exactly what Cortez did, I think, and that's exactly what I did. And I did that on purpose because I did not want to leave myself an excuse. So there I was. So I did 4 journeys. I did an Eastern journey, Western journey, Southern journey, a Great Plains journey.
Did you go by RV or car, or how did you?
Car, Airbnbs everywhere.
Okay.
Lived Airbnb in my car, and usually stayed about 5 nights in each city, and on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one.
I mean, you would have got some better stories. You would hitchhike. You probably would have been buried on the road somewhere, but that's it.
I did a lot of that when I was a kid. Yeah.
We had FBI Frank, I forget his last name, on the show about a book about the FBI road truck killers. Kind of interesting. But so Did you hold like symposiums or little conferences that you were inviting people to? Or?
Yeah. So what I did, I started out interviewing a few people that I knew, and I had a website up and running where I posted those stories, the mini biographies that I wrote for those 4 or 5 people. So I had a track record of some sort, and I met people however I could. I met them in the street. I did give 19 speeches on my journeys, most of them to Rotary clubs. Great organization. Yeah, Rotary.
Part of the country, if you will.
Yep, exactly. So I gave 19 speeches. I met people that way. I met people through the Airbnbs. I got referrals. I did, as I said, a few people I knew in Illinois and Nova Scotia. Not many. Most were perfect strangers, and I met them in so many different ways, Chris.
Mm-hmm. And what were you asking him? What were you hoping to accomplish?
So I was basically using Dan McAdams' 22 questions, which incidentally, I met Dan at Northwestern in February for lunch, and he remarkably has given me permission to publish his protocol in my book. It's Appendix A. And I jokingly tell people, if you're thinking of buying the book, don't buy it for anything I wrote, buy it for Appendix A. Well, it is... I'm just serious.
It's to get your stuff too. It's a 2-for-1.
Yeah, it's a 2-for-1. But it is really remarkable. I mean, so I interviewed 71 people, and McAdams wrote this in his book, and I didn't really believe it, but I experienced it. Of the 71 people that I interviewed, mostly perfect strangers, Chris, 30 of them broke down crying during the interview.
Really?
This is not Mickey Mouse stuff. And it's not mine. It's McAdams.
What was we want people to buy the book, so we can't tease out too much, but what was the reason they were crying? Because someone was finally listening to them? Because that was part of it. That was absolutely part of it. But I think it's just dealing with, the questions got very, very deep, right? And as people started talking about these things, and, I'm not a very big guy, so I'm not intimidating in any way whatsoever, Chris. And I think people opened up to me easily, and I was just there to listen. Remember, I'm dispassionate. I have no stake in the game, if you will, for most of these people, and they felt free talking to a stranger. Wow. That's kind of one of the problems. I think we've discussed it ad nauseum on the show is, one of the things that divide us. We don't listen to each other. We don't really listen.
We don't.
Kind of and here's what I have to say. And
exactly.
You're spending all the time setting up what you have to say.
Yeah, exactly.
We do those.
If I could, let me just read you one sentence from McAdams on the back of my book. There it is. One sentence, and it kind of sums it up. He says, people find common ground through storytelling.
Stories are the owner's manual to life.
Let alone hate.
To say on the show.
Another person once you have come to know their story. Oh. I think that says it all in a way.
Can you cut that again? Because I think it dropped a little bit on the audio.
Oh, okay. Yep.
It's
one more
worth
time.
Repeating.
Sure. Dan McAdams. People find common ground through storytelling, Leeson shows us, for it is nearly impossible to dismiss, let alone hate, another person once you have come to know their story.
Never judge a man until you walk a mile in his shoes or something like that.
And so I set out with the assumption that we kind of live in a divided world. And so in my book, I have, of the 71 people I interviewed, there are 66 mini stories, as I call them, mini biographies, very mini biographies in the book, about 550 words each, just to capture an essence of someone's life. But I also have 52 anonymous opinions from people all over the United States about where we are as a country, how divided we are, and where we are headed. And those are pretty fascinating things. So whatever they said is what I wrote.
And then you're just taking anybody from any walk of life. Like you're not trying to interview scholars or people that maybe they're just the average Joe or Jane.
Yeah. No, I think I had 6 or 7 academics. Okay. PhD type people, maybe 8. So I did have some, but I had a little bit of everything. And I had, a few people, public figures, head coach in the NHL. I interviewed Lynette Grable, who ran against Liz Cheney in Wyoming as a Democratic candidate. Liz, she is nationally known. I met her. So I got a few, Emmy Award winner out of Manchester, New Hampshire. So I had a few people who have public names, but most people just random, ordinary people.
We say that life or the stories are the owner's manuals to life. And the great thing about people's stories is how we learn. Before books and movies and television, it was the way we learned. We told stories around the campfire to each other as cavemen. There was there was always a historical griot that kept the history of the tribe in his brain.
Yep. That's exactly right.
I don't know what happened if he ever got eaten by a lion, but like, hey, protect that griot guy, man. We can't. He's the one guy with all the info. But, he would pass it on down to the next griot and all that stuff. And so it's interesting how we, but then again, the stories we have, the one quote for me is, the one thing man can always learn from his history is that man never learns from his history. Everywhere we go round and round. So, welcome to 2025, whatever that means. But so, do you want to give us you want to tease out? I mean, like I said, people need to buy the book. We don't want to give away too much. But do you want to tease out maybe some of the consensus you found, or maybe some things that surprised you that maybe you didn't expect coming when you were talking to people?
It's interesting. I was asked that question near the end of my journeys and some of the speeches I gave. What did you learn from this, Greg, and that? And what I can say is, I think I experienced what I was kind of expecting. We all have great stories. Yeah, I did, Chris. We all have great stories, and these great stories are what we might just call ordinary life, because we all live. Nobody escapes, trials and tribulations. We all have to go through that. And everyone has gone through that. People have achieved, but they've also lost and so forth. And so the idea is, there's 66 stories there. And if you read 66 stories, you're going to say, hey, wait a minute. I know that guy. Or I know that gal. Others, maybe not so much. Of course, that's to be expected. But you're going to see yourself in the book. And I think what kind of surprised me a little bit, perhaps, is, when McAdams talked about people emoting and so forth, I didn't really know if I would experience that, because he's in a clinical environment with graduate students and they know what they're getting into. I was just a random guy off the street, and yet that happened with me. So I was a little surprised by that, I must admit. But people are great, and they all have a story to tell. And some of the stories, people ask me, Greg, do you have a favorite story? And of course, the politically correct answer is no, of course not. But I always think about this one guy, the youngest guy I interviewed in Manchester, New Hampshire. Big guy, burly guy, blue collar and so forth. But what he had to overcome in life, born into a family with alcoholic mother, drug addicted father, who had an older son, who one day decided he had no more use for his father, killed him. Jeez. Family services came and got Dan and his brother because she was unfit. They went to a foster home, and it got worse. Jeez. He was in grade 4 at the time, reading at a grade 1 level. And after a few years in this foster home, these two angels came along, Chris. An older couple adopted Dan and his brother, grade 4. By the time grade 4 was over, he had gone from reading from grade 1 level to grade 6 level. They moved on to Florida. This guy was a 4.0 student. He was a star athlete. He got a full ride at Florida University, and he was a classical pianist.
Wow.
This right-off, at age 10, turned out to be an amazing person, and he turned down the scholarship at university because what he really wanted was to earn income as quickly as he could so he could get married and have a family and have a completely different life than what he grew up with. I learned 4 days ago he's engaged.
Oh.
Just an amazing story of what this guy overcame, and it's one of many stories kind of like that.
That's just amazing. We can't throw people away. The thing we love about stories and being the owner's manual to life is, we all seem to go through different tribulations and maybe trials, and of course at different stages in our life. Yeah. The great thing about stories, and we talk about this a lot on the show, is, the one thing you feel when you're under attack, or when their life is being mean to you, or you're feeling kind of victimized, or you're going through trials and tribulations that usually are kind of designed to stretch you and enable your ability to survive, is you feel very alone. And so the great thing about people's stories, the books they write, things we share with each other, is you never know who they're going to impact, number one, and number two, they help people understand that, hey, I'm not alone. Bob had my issue, and here's how Bob resolved it. Now that I've got Bob's blueprint, I lost 100 pounds one time because Penn Jillette found a guy who helped him lose 100 pounds, and then he put a book out called Presto, and I read the book, and his stories and his resetting of his belief systems about food and eating and nutrition, and helped me use the same techniques and rules that he created and find my way through the darkness of weight loss. And so and the thing is, you never know who your story is going to touch. I remember, I've talked about this before, but I remember being deep in editing in mine, and I was ready to throw it out the window. I mean, I was really burnt out writing a book in 3 months. I mean, I rammed it hard, but a lot of them were stories I have been telling for years of my journeys of life, but still just constantly rehashing them and hammering them, and doing the design work on them so they seem they were more interesting maybe and played better, but and plus trying to remember all the details because it's been that was the same part.
My favorite word about what you're talking about is cascades. It cascades, Chris. It does. And when I'm giving speeches to the Rotary clubs or whatever, they do great work. I said, you will never see the result of your work because it cascades and so forth. And that's, take it to heart, read some of the stories, but maybe even more importantly, they look at that protocol in Appendix A and they say, you know what? Maybe I should go through this, or maybe I should even write my own life story by using this as a template to get it going and so forth. And that's the way it will cascade.
Yeah. And you never know who you're going to touch, I mean,
that's right.
We talked about authors on the show where we've, they had somebody come up to them at a book signing and say, I was in prison, and we had a little group of women who were prisoners, and we used your book series to help learn to grow and be better and try and make it so we don't ever recidivize back to here. And, and she had no idea that her books were being utilized in this way. And, we just never know. I mean, I've told stories about the pain that I went through with my dog dying all of a sudden on me, and I thought it was selfish. And then all of a sudden, years, it's been since 2013 or 14, years, people come up to me and go, your story about your dog, blah, 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 and the work that you did with your dogs over the last decade, I guess now it's been, motivated me in this way. And I'm like, God, you still remember that? Wow. That had that much of an impact on you. And that's the beauty of us sharing with each other.
You never know. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned inmate. I actually met an inmate. I didn't interview him. He didn't agree, unfortunately. He was in prison in New Mexico for murder, no less.
Oh, wow.
He was exonerated, and I met him on Haight and Ashbury in San Francisco with the Gibson guitar. And, so I met him. Never got a chance to interview him, unfortunately, but I'm sure he had a great story.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting. You can learn stuff from everybody. I mean, that's why I do the podcast, because I love talking to people. Everyone's got a different journey. I always joke that maybe I'm just sick of me and my journey. I like to hear other people's journeys because I'm tired of mine. I listen to other people's. I'm like, yeah, that sounds really cool. I think I'm going to do that part. But and I think it's interesting that when we kind of sit down with each other and the example you've shown, listen to each other, realize that we're multifaceted human beings. Some of us are. There's some people on Twitter that I won't say anything about.
Maybe.
But I mean, George Carlin did have a saying, you think how dumb the average person is, and realize. But even dumb people have stories, because if dumb people didn't have stories, I wouldn't have me as the host of a podcast, because we need some idiot running the mic.
Yeah.
You're
a storyteller.
Yeah, and I try. And
you are.
What's great is if you're dumb, you have a lot of great stories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Because you make a lot of poor decisions, which explains most of my life, I suppose.
Yeah. One of the things I wrote in my book is that, you kind of alluded to it earlier, is, I wrote, lives impact lives, and it's so true. And you never know how it's going to happen.
Lives impact lives.
Lives impact lives.
I'm going to do that later today when I try and get that $20 out of my friend owes me. There might be some impact. No, I'm just teasing. Setting up jokes. People don't write me and don't resort to violence ever. What have we teased out about your book that maybe we need to tease out to get people to pick up?
Sorry, was that? What?
What more haven't we teased out? Is there anything more we can touch on?
There is, in Appendix A as well, there is one website to, write a little testimony and so forth. Amy's story is quite incredible. She had no choice. The judge gave her no choice. She walked away from her children, and she could not tell that story for years. I was the first person she ever told the story to, and she wrote this incredible testimony, which is in Appendix A. If you read that testimony, you're going to be floored at the impact that that interview that McAdams put together had on her life. Another thing, I suppose, is and a little bit who I saw, who I met, and some of the interesting things like happened. St. Louis, for example. So I'm in St. Louis. It's the last city on my Western journey. And I go, of course, to see the Great Arch, the Arch of St. Louis and so forth. And I walk in. And it's a federal park and run by the Rangers and so forth. And as I'm going through security, the Ranger's doing one of these, come here, Greg. So I lean up close and he says, "Sir, zip up your fly." Apparently, I've been walking around St. Louis, and I'm thinking to myself, Chris, so this is what retirement's going to look like, right?
Yeah.
So there were these funny instances like this that happened from time to time, and other things that didn't make it into the book, obviously, that the experiences that I had, and things that I saw. I got to see the entire continent. I drove the entire continent, and the scenery from, the Rockies to the desert to the East Coast, the beautiful hills of Pennsylvania and so forth, the South. I got to see the entire continent, Chris, and that was pretty cool too. So I recite that a little bit in the book also.
That sounds exciting. When in your website that you have, is there any services that you offer? Do you need coaching or consulting or anything like that?
So I do have a contact form, and if anybody's interested in booking me to give a speech, obviously, or interview me like you are as well, or just provide feedback, obviously, as well as is there. So I'm available for that. Now I am hitting the road. I'm off to Portugal in a few days to spend Christmas with my daughter and New Year's. And when I get back on January 15th, I hit the road again, Chris. Wow. I'm going to be going on 3 road trips, but this is going to be very, very quick. My goal is I've got 10 speeches lined up, but I'm also going to hand deliver a book to all the people I interviewed all over and sign it. That is so I'll be on the road from January 15th to basically the end of July for the most part.
Oh, wow. That should be wild. You need one of those camper vans you drive around where people can.
Yeah, I know.
I was thinking about building one of those back in the day. We were gonna
right?
Yeah, we were going to go interview people in small towns, greasy spoons, and just find out why, the cities that the freeways left behind, basically, and just kind of travel them and just have had a pull-out podcast thing that we could pull out and record, and because I find people's stories interesting, their journeys.
Yeah.
So how did you?
That journey was great.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the book Blue Highways?
I don't.
Blue Highways. William Least Half Moon was his pen name. He did exactly what you said. He drove many years ago to all the back roads. He got off the highways and talked to people in the diners and everything else. Interesting book. Haven't read it, but Blue Highways it's called.
It's got a blue tree on it in the road?
Maybe.
This
I don't
Journey
know.
into America. This might be it.
Yeah.
Journey
You got it. Yeah. William Least Half Moon is his pen name.
That's him.
Yep.
Least Heat Moon?
Yeah.
That couldn't be more obvious. But, I mean, that's I wanted to go sit. I love Greasy Spoon diners. I love those old diners. Yeah, I love them. And
Small town.
Yeah, small town. And when I was in my 18s to 20s, there was a company I worked for, and I had to drive around some of the back roads of Utah and back cities and service trucking companies and industry and different things. And so, stopping, there's a romantic thing to stopping in some of those old cities. And then some of those people, their perspective on life is different. It's almost like the real America, but not.
I get it.
It's their America. But that's that's their America. I mean, that's what makes them view this country in their way. And I mean, the other thing that interests me is why didn't you leave? Why did you stay here? Why do you make the choice to stay every day? I run a huge dating group, and we cover the state of Utah in the dating group. We hold like meetups and stuff. We have some people that are in some of these smaller cities that they're really small cities, and if you get divorced or if you're trying to, date more than one or two people, everyone knows your business, and you pretty much run out of people fairly quickly.
I suppose.
A state like Utah that, is very high marriage, low single state. If you go to California, Southern California, I think
Different story.
the weirdos are the people who are married. They're the freak zones. I'm just teasing people, but you find more singles than you do married people. But asking people like, why do you stay here? It's probably hard to find a new spouse here. It's probably hard to date anybody new here. But what is it about this? And
it's home, I guess.
Yeah, it's home. It's what they know. The people are different, than, you come up to a big city where everything's usually, hustle, bustle, and people are a little bit more selfish into themselves. Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to check out that book, though, because I wanted to do it. And I was actually, we used to do a lot of events before COVID. We'd drive to CES and do all this personal interviews one-on-one. So we were making a rig for that. So we had a remote van. But then I like taking my dogs with me instead of sheltering them. And so I wanted to, kill all those birds with one stone, where we take 2 weeks driving out to, say, CES show or South by Southwest in Texas, and then we do these interviews along the way, and then I just nap, and the dogs are with me, and dogs can stay in a kennel or wherever I'm at, but at night they'd be able to stay with me, and so it's just kind of like a roaming sort of thing. And then the great thing about it would be that I could do it at my own pace. I'm going to take 2 weeks and drive to Texas and just fuck around, and I'm still enthralled by the idea, but I don't know. It's much easier to get people on remote cameras now, so we got that.
True. Yeah, no, and my road trips were, I think, 83, 82, 56, and 41 days or something like this.
Wow.
On the road, yeah. And, I got to meet great people everywhere. Didn't matter whether it was in California or Wyoming or whatever, or Alabama, didn't matter. They were just great people, Chris, and from all stripes of life.
That really brings a good topic to what we're talking about in the show. The one thing I remember, the great insult comic from the 30s on, 50s, 60s, and I always forget his name, but he was always a little sharp, and he would tell jokes that were colored and, sometimes borderline on the racism or profile stuff. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but people know who I'm talking about, the insult comic. He was always on Johnny Carson and stuff. But he said you can say stuff to people, and as long as they know that it's from the heart and you care about them, and they can sense that in how you talk to them. And I've tried to perfect that, and I can literally approach almost anyone anywhere and get them to smile or have a conversation with them. And somehow I'm able to deliver that. Somehow I've developed that where I'm able to deliver that where they go, he's not being a troll. He's not being an asshole. He's being really funny. And it's kind of, it's a really hard balance to do it in a funny way, but still, be like, hey, I'm with you. We're not, I'm not bashing you. We're having fun. I remember there was one time, I think I pushed a little too far, but I was at the gym several months ago, and this guy, there was a ton of people there, and this guy was walking towards me, and I noticed him oogling his butt in the mirrors of the gym. And I mean, normally you see the women doing stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
The guy doing it, and he just got done working out, and I don't know, he wanted to see, I don't know, how things were doing for whatever he lifted,
I guess.
And then he was, but he was just like, he really spent too much time, at least in my purview, oogling his butt, and then he turned and he started walking towards me, and I was going the other way, and I said, hey man, don't worry about it, your butt looks just fine. Which is not like the coolest thing to say to another gym.
In the gym.
Probably don't want to say that in the locker room. But I was kind of like just feeling, I wonder if I can get away with this shit.
What was his reaction?
He laughed. He totally got it. And I was able to convey that message of, hey man, we're just...
Yeah, I think people can pick that up in other people and so forth. And I say, I'm not an imposing fellow, and I think people felt comfortable that way. And when I started asking the questions, and I opened up a little bit about myself as well, and I think it helped for them. Maybe early.
Well, you had your fly open.
I had my fly open in St. Louis. Yeah, that's true.
That's definitely opening up.
Yeah, definitely opening up. Yeah, I get it. Good one. And I think that kind of helps and so forth to people drop that guard a bit.
But that willingness to listen, do you think that was a big... Because no one really wants to listen to each other anymore, especially on social media.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say it. Listen, I've had several people say to me, Greg, when's our next session? Oh yeah, a few people have said that. I'm not a trained psychologist in any way whatsoever, of course, but I just listen. And I think you're right. We go through life and people don't necessarily really truly listen to what it is you have to say. And when you find someone who is actually listening to you and wants to learn about who you are, that was it. You know, there are some people who are a little more clinical than others. Obviously, everybody's an individual. But for the most part, Chris, people really got into it.
Wow. That's just amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing things we can do, folks, when we just actually sit, shut up, and listen to people.
Yeah.
And that's just really it. And that way you're going to get the best stories. You're going to get to understand them. You're probably going to understand their journey, which is something that shapes them as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's all about the journey. Yep. You got it. You got that right.
That was the hardest thing that I had when I was growing up, because I was ADHD, probably very ADHD, and I believed in perfection. And I believed everything I was striving for was to eventually be perfect and to get things right. And there was no element for failure. And so when I would fail or when I'd have issues, people would always say that to me. They go, "It's about the journey, not the destination, Chris. Calm down." And it would make me so angry. I was so upset because it sounded like a cop-out to me. That, it's about the journey. It's not about the goal. Oh, you didn't run the marathon? Well, it's about the journey. It's not that you didn't win the marathon or you didn't finish the marathon. And you're just like, F you, I wanted to finish the marathon. But then you start, you go through life and you realize, what's that famous line that's in Pink Floyd's thing that always resonates with me since the first time I heard it? No one told you when to run, you missed the starting gun. And a lot of people go through life and they don't look around. I remember driving down the highway with my buddy in his pickup truck when we were teenagers, and I'd be like, "Hey, do you see that girl?" And she was she's running her fingers through her hair. She's a beautiful girl. And there's another girl over there. And he's, I don't know, when did you see this? And I'm like, do you look outside of your purview of your thing? And then, of course, learning to think outside the box, learning to try and see things outside of paradigms, challenging my paradigms. Yeah. And it's funny to me how many people don't look around. And sometimes they don't wake up till their midlife crisis and go, where have I been these 20 years?
Yeah, so to some extent, I was a little bit like that as a younger man, Chris. I didn't partake and so forth in some ways. And I think, I went through an absolute crisis on my 39th birthday when I realized I was never, ever going to be a father. And, I had a very great conversation with the Infinite One that day. And I gave thanks for everything I had, and not the good things. I give thanks for everything on that day. And about 6 years later, there I am in China, and this little girl is placed in my arms, and I'm a father after giving up on that dream. And second thing I want to do with the family is I want to show my daughter the world. And are you familiar with couch surfing?
Yeah.
I've couch surfed
for some of it too.
It is. I've couch surfed my daughter all over the world. She's been to about including Russia. We've been to about 22 countries. So this kind of came late in my life, this whole realization, Chris, to some extent. Even though I'd read those great books and they taught me a lot, I never really lived it until probably my mid-40s. And the world kind of started opening up after I adopted my daughter, and just wonderful things started happening in a lot of ways. And I'm at where I'm at now, pursuing this dream that kind of got cut off at the knees at age 27 when I got wiped out trading commodities, lost everything, lost all my investor money, the whole works, started at rock bottom to work my way back, and got a chance to relive this dream that I had for a long time, but just postponed. And here I am now doing what I really, really love to do.
Wow. It's interesting. Sometimes maybe things, I don't believe that there's, some puppet master in the sky, but everyone's welcome to believe what they want, I suppose, as long as you don't hurt other people with it and shove it in other people's faces. But, I believe sometimes that when, sometimes I'll have creative ideas and I'll be like, I think this needs some maturity. I think it needs, like a fine wine. It needs a little bit more development. It's not ready now. And, And sometimes we just need more experiences,
Yeah.
Kind of like you went out and did the total griot story collector thing and created those experiences for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to be patient and let it develop instead of trying to force it. That's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life is you can't force things to happen sometimes. You just have to let it happen.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to listen. You have to take the time to listen. And a lot of times when we're bashing our heads up against something, I'm trying to resolve something, it's because I'm trying to force, that square peg in that round hole, and I'm not listening to the feet that goes, hey, dummy, it's the square peg in the round hole. You're the problem. And I'm just not going, it could be me, And, it's really good examples and lessons we're teaching here, folks. If you haven't learned to go back and listen to the show. So give us your final thoughts as we go out. Tell people where they can pick up the book and their .coms where they can get to know you on the interwebs in the sky.
Yep. So it's GregoryLeesonBooks.com. You can buy it right there, or you can look up my name, Gregory Leeson. It'll come up, and it's on Amazon, so you can buy it through Amazon as well. So it's available there. And, hopefully it resonates. The ideas resonate. I know I've learned some things in life, and I wrote them down. I wrote the 2 great rules for my daughter and gave it to her for Christmas in 22. I kind of learned from this process. And rule number 2 is for anything you do, there's no substitute for preparation. Wow. And rule number 1 is for anything you do, have no fear.
I thought it was don't talk about Fight Club.
About what?
I thought it was don't talk about Fight Club was rule number 1.
No, have no fear. I told her, I said, and that's kind of the 2 lessons I learned from this whole process.
Wow.
Those 2 things.
And now we've learned so much more by having you on the show. Thank you very much for coming to the show. We really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Chris.
Great show. And Gregory, give us the .com one last time so that people have it.
It's Gregory Leeson, Leeson, books.com.
And thanks, Monis, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity, and Chris Voss, Facebook.com. Be good to each other. Stay safe. Keep listening and learning. We'll see you next time. Maybe I'll add that. Keep listening.